we were in negotiations, investing in real estate.
They're winning, they're making money.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Real Estate Educators Podcast, where we provide the education you can build on. I am your host, Kevin Amolsch. This podcast is so much fun. We are having a great time helping real estate investors and educators. So if you're out there fixing and flipping, you're out there trying to build a portfolio, or if you're providing content to investors, this is the podcast for you. I have a super special guest. We don't have very many attorneys on the show, so we have a great attorney today. She focuses on mortgages and real estate and construction and contractors. She's been doing it a long time. Very good. I'm excited to meet her. Miss Corinne, thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Hello, Kevin. So good to meet you. Thank you for having me. And I'm really excited. As you just said, we've got plenty of options to chat about. So I'm excited to find out together what we delve into today.
Yeah, I'm excited to see where the conversation goes as well. But I want to get to know you a little bit before we get to some advice and how we could help our listeners. So take me back. How did you get started? Sounds like you went into law pretty early. So how did you get started?
So I picture in your mind's eye that incredibly nerdy little kid who's saying, you know, all the other kids want to be firefighters or astronauts. And I'm like, I would like to go to law school at age, I think 6.
Wow.
So I've been a dweeb from the start and I've followed that through. I've always known I wanted to be an attorney, but the kind of focusing on property and construction and related issues definitely was a part that was a twist. I've migrated a lot, so I have seen, I joke sometimes that I'm a dirt lawyer because it's anything to do with the ground and what happens on or about it. But I've been on dirt in all kinds of places. I grew up in Southern California, lived in Pennsylvania, went to law school in DC, and then moved out here to Michigan. And through all of that and experiencing the different options of what you can be as an attorney, I found I really like having a blend of both transactional and litigation work. And so I love the tangible part of property law where you can walk by somewhere and say, hey, that's a building that's serving a purpose and being part of somebody's life when before maybe it was abandoned, it wasn't accomplishing anything. And now I can see people living their lives there. So I love that and fun confluence of events, but I'm glad that it led me here.
Yeah, I think we share that. I really do enjoy real estate. One of the reasons is you could just see the transformation and you can really improve lives. That's one of the things I enjoy about what I do. And it sounds like you're doing the same.
100%.
You made your way over to Michigan. What took you out there?
You go on a date, you meet somebody you like, and all of a sudden you move to the frozen tundra. My family asks me exactly that question plenty growing up in Southern California, but I have a car with heated seats and I remote start it. And really, to me, that's all it takes to survive the frozen winters. And the summers are pretty nice, especially compared to 120 Los Angeles summers. So it's a pretty good gig. Plus, I do genuinely love Michigan as far as the people, the environment, and the cost of living can't be beat. I've been told I should also get some kind of stipend from the Michigan Tourism Board, but it's a good spot. I'm happy to be planted out here.
You know, it's interesting about Michigan. I'm trying to hit 50 states before I'm 50. So that's like this little personal goal of mine. And Michigan has not been, I have not checked that one off yet.
Oh my goodness. Well, okay. Sponsored by the Tourism Board, only in joke, not in fact, but come on down. This is the right time of year. Fall-ish, anything but winter, frankly, is the right time of year, in my opinion. But it's beautiful out here. There's a lot of fun stuff to do if you like nature at all. We have lots of it, and you can either look at it from a nice cabin, or you can be in it kayaking, as people who aren't me like to do.
Oh, nice. And you said that there's a lot of fix and flipping going on. You've seen some your neighborhoods completely transformed by real estate investors. So tell me what you're seeing.
Absolutely. So I live in a suburb just outside of Detroit. It's known as Fabulous Ferndale, and it's one of those neighborhoods. It's not uncommon in Metro Detroit to see areas that have really changed and developed in a pretty short turnaround time. As everybody knows, Detroit and the whole metro area has been through quite a lot in the last couple of decades, but that does mean that there's a lot of room and opportunity for growth. And, for folks who maybe wouldn't be in a position to pursue investment and to, put themselves in a position to flip or to try and make an unused space into a home for somebody, there are a lot more flexible opportunities to do that in Detroit just because we have that housing stock. So even on my street within the last couple of years, there were a couple properties that weren't kind of maintained in a top of the line way and were, I think, older residents having trouble keeping up with the space that in the last year have turned into really, really fabulous rental properties that have brought new families, young families with kids, same age as my kid, into our neighborhood. So it's been really great.
So you said housing stock. So I'm gonna unpack that a little bit. Are you saying that there's a lot of inventory, and so it's easier for investors to get in a market like that?
Yes, but I'll give it with a caveat is it's inventory with a little bit of hustle required. So there are a significant number of vacant homes still in certain areas in the Metro Detroit zone. Within the city of Detroit in particular, and in the past there have been some issues relating to blight and property availability. So it means that a lot of these available homes do have some work to be done. They've been missing some love for a couple months, years, depends. However, the huge upside of that is that one, it gives you an opportunity to genuinely transform and improve a neighborhood in a super meaningful way. And two, a lot of them are actually located in these communities that have a really strong anchor population, sometimes multi-generational families who've been in the same homes, who really care about the neighborhood and who are very excited to see folks coming back into the area, and who can help promote kind of that community growth. So it's not with zero work, but there's a lot of upside. And frankly, I actually had a case a couple years ago where I was giving away properties. It was one where I was
I've read about
representing
that.
a lender. Yeah, I gave away 4 free properties, actually. They took some work. And one of them, I will say, it was land. It was not, I would not call it a home at that point. That was just, there had been a fire. That was the condition that it was in. But 3 out of 4 of them were very much restorable homes. And I believe at least 2 that I know of, I think, last time I checked, are occupied today, where they wouldn't have been occupiable before. So the pricing can't be beat, especially when they're free.
Yeah. Was the city doing that also?
So there is the Detroit Land Bank, and there are some of the harder hit, nearby areas have land banks as well. It's not the same as it was, if you're thinking of what you might have heard around 2008, it's not quite like that anymore. But there really are a lot of opportunities still for making sure that these not so well-maintained homes can be homes again. And the thing that I do always talk to people about, though, if we're having exactly this conversation about going down that road, is that you have to think really critically about what the tax implications might be and understand how to look at the title situation. I do a fair amount of title insurance litigation as well, which I do think people fail to contemplate the value of title insurance and what it can do for folks in some situations. But making sure that, especially if you're doing something like purchasing at a sheriff's sale or you're purchasing from a land bank, make sure that you understand what your tax title circumstances are before you dive in head first.
Yeah, that's interesting. So can there really be title issues if it's city owned?
Oh, yeah. And I say this with all due love and enthusiasm and respect. Never underestimate the degree to which things have not been attended to, even if it's by the city. Always check your title.
Yeah, I'm an advocate of title insurance. I've been through
Good.
multiple. We've filed, we've closed over 2,600 loans now. So of course we've seen a lot. I still learn. I gotta tell you, I learn it every day. But there's been multiple times where we've had to file claims, and these are even for foreclosures where you're told that it totally cleaned the title. Foreclosure is supposed to clean it completely. And it hadn't. So I agree with you. Is there a story you could share about
Oh
where
boy.
where this has come up?
Yeah, so one that I can tell you about, I'll kind of give you the concept first, then we can talk about the specific instance. Although before I get too far into this, I will give my formal official lawyerly disclaimer. I am a lawyer, but if you're listening, unless you have specifically retained me and you have it in writing, I'm not your lawyer. So I'm talking generally. I'm not giving anyone any legal advice, and it's not my intent that anyone take anything that comes out of my mouth in that way. However, if you do want me to be your lawyer, happy to chat about that. But until then, I'm not. Okay, fully disclaimed. So all that aside,
We'll be sure not to edit that out.
yeah, exactly. Leave that one in.
We'll
If
leave
there's a
that
way
in.
to audio, put it in bold, whatever you can do. Okay. The concept I want to kind of give background on first is the redemption period, and it varies from state to state. Your mileage may vary, but after a foreclosure takes place, you've gone to your sheriff's sale, you purchase the property at sale. A lot of people think, ta-da, I bought it, I'm done. Not the case. It is more complicated than that. There are certain circumstances under which the former owner of that property can pop back up and redeem the property, which means purchase it back for a statutorily set amount, right? So there are some situations that I've seen where folks get really excited. An easy one for first-time investors, that they get really excited after a foreclosure sale and they come in hot, they sheriff's sale Monday, they show up on Tuesday morning ready to rumble with all their tools. They start working on the property. They want to turn it around and get it rentable ASAP. And then somebody shows up with a bag of cash that maybe doesn't account for the work that you just spent months potentially doing. You have already flipped that property. You are ready to sign a new tenant. You could even have a new tenant in the property, and you did not actually have clear title to that property. You just spent who knows how much renovating it, making it beautiful for a tenant that is now going to get the boot and have you on the hook potentially, because you did not own that property in the way that you thought you did. Because I'll get a little bit lawyery nerdy for a second. I promise not for too long. When we say own property, that's a very nebulous concept, right? In law school, they actually talk to us about it as a bundle of sticks, is the metaphor that they use to teach it. That ownership of a property is actually not a single tangible thing you can hold in your hand. Ownership has all these elements. It's possession, it's legal title, it's ability to use and access. And you don't always hold all of those sticks in your little hand when you think you do. One of the things that helps you double check your pile of sticks and make sure you have all the bits you need is title insurance. So never forget it.
So give me a story.
Oh man. Okay. This one is a little bit of a fun one. So I had a client who he had lived in his home for, I think, 5 or 6 years at that point. And it was one of those areas that is up and coming, revitalizing, a trendy area in that way. And he and his partner were one of the first folks to move in and make that happen, right? He had a gorgeous home. It was absolutely beautiful. He got a great deal on it. It was a cash purchase. And so they didn't have title insurance because it was a cash purchase through a family friend, and they were ready to move out. They were actually going to repurpose what had been their home as an investment property. They were upsizing, living the dream. And they're getting ready to close. They have a buyer, everything's lined up, good to go. And they're in their new place already. And they get a call from their title company and they hear, hey, it's not looking perfect. The dimensions that are in the appraisal don't actually match the dimensions when you take the fancy little legal description that's not in particularly legible English. The language in the legal description, the length of their fence, north-south, did not match what was in the appraisal. So we're going back and forth trying to figure out what it is. That's around the time that he calls me. And lo and behold, where his fence was in reality on the ground did not match where his property line had been. And in fact, what he had been using as his backyard extended pretty significantly into his neighbor's backyard. And he had built a big, beautiful deck.
Oh, no.
Mm-hmm. And so all of a sudden you've got something that is part of the property, part of what's in, your purchase agreement that he was selling, that was not built on his ground. And they had been there, it was either 5 or 6 years. This is another one where your mileage varies state to state, but there's a thing called adverse possession, where if you have occupied and laid claim to a chunk of ground for a statutorily set period of time, it can become yours if it meets all these particular characteristics and criteria, yada, yada, lawyery nonsense. But so my first thought when I started talking to him about this was, okay, great. Let's see where are we at on adverse possession. Perhaps this is actually functionally already yours and we just need to, it's still a lawsuit. No one's going to have a fun time, but we're in a good place to say, this is your land. This is part of your property that you can sell. Unfortunately, statutory timeline for adverse possession is 7 years. He had not quite met it. So he had been using this piece of ground to which he did not have any legal claim. And sometimes in those situations, you can say, okay, let's wait it out. We can just wait it out, not make any noise until it's been 7 years. Anyway.
What happened? Did the property owner behind him?
We settled. He ended up buying
Okay.
that chunk for a good discount.
Well, that's good.
But
So it worked out well.
It worked out, especially because, the guy behind him didn't have any expectations about the use of that chunk of land. So to him, it was kind of a windfall. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He just woke up and somebody said, hey, can I buy something you didn't think that you had for a non-zero amount of money? That was a pretty good weekday surprise. But yeah.
So it worked out for both sides on that one. That's good.
But it was something that totally could have been avoided. Much as I have fun in litigation, but my clients have way less fun than I do. I try and make it pleasant, but nobody wants to be involved in litigation. And it's something that would have been caught, or at least would have been rectifiable. So a title search at the outset probably would have caught this issue and would have flagged something and figured out that something was afoot, especially because if a survey hasn't been done in a while, in all likelihood, you want to have a survey done. But title insurance would have covered it. But it's just there were a lot of ways this could have been resolved and could have been avoided at the outset. And because it was a family friend type cash purchase, that makes it tough. So just make sure you're checking your boxes, even if you're getting a great cash deal somewhere.
This episode is brought to you by Pine Financial Group. Pine Financial is a private lender specializing in short-term rehab lending to real estate investors. Got a property that needs some love? We can help. We are able to offer funding solutions because we raise private money from individual investors. With more than 15 years of experience, Pine offers passive investors an alternative that provides stability, consistency, and security to your portfolio. If you like real estate but want to avoid the ups and downs and effort, a Pine mortgage fund could be a perfect fit for you. Accredited investors will experience an 8% preferred return and profit sharing. Diversify your portfolio out of Wall Street and into Main Street with a Pine Financial Group mortgage fund. Get more information at pinefinancialgroup.com. That's pinefinancialgroup.com. This is good advice for private lenders also. So when you get a title policy in most states, there's going to be standard exceptions. So they're going to take exception to certain things and you're not going to be covered. So in title insurance, it's very interesting because it's the only insurance policy that doesn't insure potential risk, future risk. It insures everything that's already happened. Right.
So that's absolutely right.
It's very interesting. But if you want to remove those standard exceptions, which is possible with endorsements or an extended policy, they require the survey. So in that instance, you would have found this. So I totally agree. So listeners out there, if you're private lending or if you're out there buying title insurance, both the owner's policy and lender's policy is vital to staying safe.
I think that's a good distinction to make as well, because, if you're thinking about it, oh, this is something for homeowners, this isn't for me. It's not going to be relevant to me if I'm not using the property or whatever the case may be. There is a distinction between the owner's policy and the lender's policy. The owner's policy is ensuring the ownership interest in the property, and that's for the property owner. Makes sense. The lender's policy, though, is ensuring that the interest that you are secured in is actually there. So it's not just ensuring that the person from whom you are getting the mortgage has an interest that they can mortgage. It also is ensuring the priority of your interest as a lender as well. So I don't know, it's a little bit of a nerdier subject. I'm happy to go into, we have some fun priority disputes. I've had a lot of cases with construction liens and condo and homeowners association liens. But that priority thing can be a real sticking point. And we resolve a lot of cases for our clients sometimes through submitting a title claim, and then a title insurance attorney shows up and takes care of the whole thing at no cost to the client. And I love that outcome.
Yeah, and those priority disputes is common. Let's say that it's common, especially in your world dealing with contractors, which I definitely want to get to, because you look at these deals, fix and flips, new construction from the contractors through the contractor's lens, and mechanics lens is an issue, and it's possible to pay your contractor and then them not pay their subcontractors and still have some lien risk, right? Which is another reason for title insurance. But before we get on to into that, I want to get back to the redemption period. I know every state has different laws and very different. There's a wide range in the redemption laws in the states. But usually when you have a state like Michigan, it sounds like, where there is owner redemption rights, there's sometimes potential opportunity for real estate investors. Can you maybe talk a little bit about if I'm an investor listening to this podcast, how can I use redemption rights to maybe acquire a property or make some money or any of that?
Ooh, what a good question. Okay. So in some circumstances, caveat, caveat, lawyer caveat, mileage may vary. In some circumstances, redemption rights can be assignable, which means that, for example, if Tom and Jane Smith homeowners go through a foreclosure process and they are at that point where the foreclosure sale has already happened, but they still are holding on to their right of redemption. In theory, a particularly savvy investor who's interested in doing so could work with our homeowner couple and say, look, I am going to provide some kind of alternate financing, or I'm going to come in and just purchase the property outright. By taking over your redemption rights, because redemption rights aren't available to the general public. The statutes that create those rights don't say, oh, anybody on the planet can come in and pay this price and, snag that out from under the new owner following the foreclosure sale. It's a right that's specific to the homeowners whose interest was foreclosed on prior. So it's kind of a complicated situation. And there are a lot of folks out there who use it in a really negative and malevolent way. So, keeping an eye on what is your business model? Is it compliant? Is it genuinely to the benefit of the homeowners? Because there are a lot of folks who kind of market themselves as foreclosure relief in a way that is not legally compliant. And that is the type of situation where, for example, somebody comes in, picks up a homeowner's redemption rights, and then rents the property back to those same homeowners at an incredibly jacked up rate. You're going to get into a whole world of hurt, likely with the federal government, if that's the direction you're going. So if you're thinking about this type of option for pursuing opportunities, I highly this is the only formal recommendation that I will ever technically make. I recommend that you speak to counsel in your jurisdiction to make sure that you're doing it the right way. But if you do it the right way, there can be some good opportunities available there.
Yeah, so this is interesting. In Colorado, they have the Foreclosure Protection Act, and it's so specific that it tells you what font size to use in your disclosure. Okay, and that's because of exactly what you're talking about. So yes, use your attorneys. Now in Colorado, we don't have owner redemption rights. There's redemption rights for lien holders, subordinate lien holders, but no owner. Minnesota is very different. Minnesota has a 6-month owner redemption, and then there's lien right redemptions after that. So Michigan sounds like owner redemption, but I guess where I'm going with this is I don't think you should take advantage of anybody. I'm not saying that, but if the homeowner is going to lose their property and get nothing, and you could find a way to give them 5 or 10 grand and they will deed you the property. So basically subject to everything else that's going on. And then you could step into those redemption rights. So it's almost like assigning redemption rights, but you're actually taking control by taking the title. I do see that. What are your thoughts on that?
I think I'm going to give a hard mileage may vary, because that is something that I know is addressed in some states by legislation. It's one of those things on the list that they've put a lot of guardrails on since 2008, just because it's a complicated area. And it is, even if your individual goals are exactly what you just described, that you're doing something positive for the homeowners, positive for the community. And, it is such an area that is really vulnerable to scammers. So there's a lot of tight regulation on it. So that's definitely one that there's a lot of room for something productive, but you have to check on exactly how you're doing it. But it can be quite an opportunity for folks where you can do it compliantly.
So if we were in Michigan trying to pick up some foreclosures, we would call you.
Michigan, New York, DC, not as many to be had in DC, small surface area, but those are my states. And you're also welcome to call. We have a network. It's the Law Firm Alliance, actually, which sounds like a super group somewhere. But it's a network of similarly sized law firms. We're in all 50 states and actually a couple international locations. So happy to make a referral to help folks do that the right way.
Okay, that's great. Now let's get into the contractors, because I know this is sort of your niche. I know you do a lot with mortgages and lenders and that kind of thing, but I think our listener would benefit more from how to handle and deal with contractors. Our listeners are fixing and flipping houses, so they deal with contractors daily. What's some advice you can give us on how to stay safe?
Sure. And spoiler, not a general advice, not formal legal advice, but with that caveat, an angel loses its wings every time a potential new client comes to me and says, I'm a contractor, I have a problem with a contractor, and I do not have a written agreement. I cry into my pillow at night thinking about all the work done with no written agreement. It breaks my little heart, truly. So I think the biggest first hurdle is have a contract rather than not having one. Let's start there. Even if it's your cousin, even if it's your brother-in-law's best friend from middle school, whatever, get a written agreement. Give me personally peace in my heart. Beyond that, though, regardless of what is in your agreement, obviously, I'm going to have strong opinions about what should go in it and what terms you can use to protect yourself. If you don't know what's in your agreement because you just got a template online and you're just using it, your contract is your toolbox. And there are provisions you can use in there, notice provisions, opportunities to say, hey, we're going to put together a change order. We're going to, when crazy things happen during construction, which is nearly a guarantee, if you don't know what options your contract gives you, it might as well not be there. So have a contract and know what's in it. And then once you've accomplished those steps, then we'll talk nuance.
Yeah, I think we call it contractor. Right? You have to have an agreement. And there's some powerful things you could do in there, like deadlines.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Now, I got to be honest with you. I've never enforced a deadline clause, but what it has done for me is give me leverage in a negotiation.
That's 99% of the function of a lot of those things. And I think the other thing is, especially in the last couple of years, there have been a lot of unfun adventures for folks as far as changes in availability and pricing of materials. And if you have spec'd something out and it was going to be marble countertops, and now all of a sudden marble's not available, we're looking at tile, linoleum, heaven knows what instead, right? What change is that going to have on your contract pricing, and how is that memorialized? Because the number of times that I've seen a contract that seems to have no relationship to the actual finished work, and now they're arguing about, well, he says I owe another 10 grand, but we swapped out the marble for bargain basement butcher block, and we're going to do an addition and there's not an addition, and none of those changes are memorialized in writing. If you don't have something specific within, we call it the four corners of the contract, which is not a very technical sounding legal term, but it has that functionality. A lot of form contracts, and almost everyone, whether it's customized or not, will have an integration clause, which says if it's not in this document or a signed amendment to this document, it doesn't exist. So if you had a phone call where you said, oh, we're going to downgrade, it should cost this much less money, it should XYZ, none of that's real unless it's in writing if your contract has that integration clause, and it probably does.
Right. Everyone I've seen has that.
It's
so
standard
that's why
issue.
you do change orders, right?
Absolutely. Change orders. I also love, and I think it's an underutilized tool. You have to have it provided for in your base contract as well. I love an RFI, request for information. They can go both directions, but building that tool into a contract can be so useful because a lot of the time you don't know the answer to something, right? When you're putting a contract together, you're saying, I want there to be these fixtures in the bathroom. Maybe we're speccing it out at this price point, but you haven't ripped open the walls yet. Who knows what's going to be in there? And maybe you don't know which side of the room the bathtub is going to go on, because until you open up the walls, you don't know the condition of plumbing, right? In that situation, you can you're going to accidentally leave information out when you're putting together your scope of work for your initial agreement. But if you're looking for information from your contractor, you can use an RFI as a tool to say, hey, where are we at? What are the situations? But the most commonly used way that I love it is encouraging your contractors to use it with you as the property owner. They can use it to say, hey, we didn't say in the scope of work, do you want granite or marble? Do you want this side or that side? What finishes and fixtures do you want? And they can inquire, and then you have a written record that becomes part of the contract where you ask those questions, they show what was missing, and there's a paper trail. I'm all about litigation proofing and being kind to your future self in how you handle a project. And doing things that create a paper trail for yourself will make your life infinitely better if you do end up in a dispute down the line, and can be the difference between a negotiated solution pretty quickly because you can say, see attachment, you agreed to this, or litigation because you have to, he said, she said, everybody said, until you're in court.
So Corinne, you remember I said I'm learning something every day? Thank you. I just learned something.
Happy to contribute.
So that's awesome. All right, we do got to get wrapped up here, but I have to ask the question because you brought it up. You said an owner has to, or the contractor saying you owe me 10 grand more than I thought I was going to owe. So if that scenario comes up, because I've seen it also, how do I, as a fix and flip investor, handle that dispute?
A couple of ways, and it's going to depend on whether that number is 1 grand, 10 grand, 50 grand, right? You have kind of a range of potential solutions. I think the first thing to do, I'm also all about maintaining relationships, right? Because the best contractor is the one that you're working with for a 10th time, who understands you, who you trust and you know. So I generally like to start out by seeing what can be done within that relationship and have a human conversation and say, hey, I'm surprised by this. Here's the paragraph number in our written contract, which we have because we listened to a wonderful podcast who told us to make sure to always have a contract in writing. But here's the paragraph number in our written contract that explains this is the maximum guaranteed maximum price we're going with, or this is, whatever the case may be, saying this is why I thought it was different. I don't have anything else in our contract that says something to the contrary. Can you explain? And I love having those conversations. You can have them in person to maintain the relationship, but confirming them in email, because I love an email. It's in writing and it's timestamped, and it makes a great piece of evidence if you need it later. If that doesn't resolve it, a lot of the time folks have a strong reaction to something with similar content, but that is on attorney letterhead, right? People just have a big gut reaction. That is, if you can't resolve it just through regular human communication, that's often the next step. And then after that, if need be, you can address it through litigation. Now, as a property owner, you're in a little bit easier spot because it's sort of on them to pursue recovery and to take that next step. You know, if they want to move forward with a lien on the property or a lawsuit, the onus is on them to push those buttons. But it's a lot better to know what your options are by knowing your contract and having somebody that you trust that you can call to help you interpret your contract. And unless you also suffered through law school and, you know, we're willing to put that evil on yourself and then go out in the world and be an investor as well. Probably you want to have somebody in your jurisdiction who's an attorney you can trust to help you talk through that. And you don't have to sue someone just because you talk to your attorney.
Yeah, agreed. I do find it interesting how you answer that, saying that the homeowner's in a pretty strong position. That's how I heard what you said.
Yeah.
Gosh, in the states that we work, the contractor could just put a lien on the property, whether it's a legitimate 10 grand that you owe them or not. And then that really could create a problem for the homeowner. So I think that I would think that they have a stronger position, but
in some ways, yes, in some ways, no. And I'm very, I try and set expectations really low about this, but in a lot of states, Michigan being one of them, sure, your contractor can go and put an absolutely garbage lien on your property because they pretended to do work. They actually burned the whole place down. Who knows? Under the Michigan Construction Lien Act, however, attorney's fees incurred in getting rid of and defending against a fraudulent lien are recoverable. So I actually have a case. As we speak, I'm a week and a half out from going to what is part 2 of trial, where I am representing a homeowner who had a to-do, I'll call it, with a contractor that she hired who did exactly that and put a totally bogus lien on her property. We were successful at trial. We got the lien removed. And so now we are in phase 2 of trial coming up, which is the hearing on the amount of the award of costs and attorney's fees. The court's already ruled that we are getting costs and attorney's fees. We just have to prove how much we spent. So, which is fun because then I end up as a witness instead of the attorney. I have to have one of my colleagues question me. But
I'm doing that I'm going through the exact lawsuit right now where our attorney had to switch to that's so funny.
Yep.
It's actually not funny at all, but that is what I'm dealing with right now.
The small world.
I know we have to wrap up, but we have to ask how to protect ourselves from liens. So I know we could do lien waivers, partials, and finals, and all that.
Absolutely.
Quick, maybe 30 seconds. How do we protect ourselves from these liens?
The big sneaker on these always, because you got to have lien waivers. That should be built into your agreement. If it's not, please call someone. But underneath that is the subcontractor liens, because if the subcontractors are not paid by the general contractor, they still have the ability to lien. So there are clauses that you can include in your primary contract for indemnification, for giving that general contractor the obligation to step in and clear that lien. You also have options for bonds. You can do joint checks if you're worried about something in advance. There's a lot of flexibility in that, but it has to be built into your contract from the outset. So you got to be working with a good form, and you have to not be afraid if a contractor comes to you with a form that isn't good. Push back, make the changes that you need, have your own form. A lot of the time, folks may not even have one of their own. They're happy to adopt yours, right? So take that step, know what's in the agreements you sign, protect yourself, and then use it.
Yeah, love it. And it's not a bad idea to visit your projects, y'all.
Oh,
and
dear. Yes, please.
Maybe have a conversation with the subs. It's not a bad idea to build a little relationship there. They'll take better care of you if they can put a face behind the project.
Absolutely.
All right, I'm going to wrap up with this. I'm going to go through my notes. I did take some notes. I actually took quite a lot, Corinne. Look at that. Bunch of notes.
We all learned. I love it. I'm
going to go through my notes. You're going to tell me if there's anything that the listener should know that I missed. Then I want to not forget your contact information and then one final piece of advice.
All right.
So we started off, you mentioned inventory can create opportunity, and you're seeing that in your own backyard, but it is going to take work. So a lot of these projects are going to take work. So for you lazy investor, this probably isn't the way to make money.
Yep.
Okay. That was my words, not her words. Always use title insurance. Be sure you understand foreclosure laws if you're going to play on that field. Difference in lender policies and owner policies. So depending on what side of the transaction, if you're the owner or if you're a private lender, make sure you're getting the correct policy. And frankly, if there's a loan, you should have both policies every transaction you do.
Absolutely.
Redemption rights can be assignable, so there could potentially be some buying opportunities using redemption rights, but please use an attorney, understand the state laws. Every state has very specific foreclosure laws and foreclosure protection laws. A lot of that came out of the 2008 crisis. What did I put here? Make sure your contract is number one when dealing with contractors. So that's step one in protecting yourself. Use change orders every time that there's a change to the contract, because everything is in writing. You said inside the four corners. Build in a request for info clause, an RFI. So this is what I learned today. I haven't thought about that. And you took it a step farther and say it's a good for you to have in your clause because the contractor should be using it. So if they're doing
Absolutely.
something that's outside the contract, did they ask for the information that they needed to be successful?
Sure.
Try
And
to
that's an
preserve.
idea, just to give context on that, that's an idea that's really commonly used in large scale commercial construction, but has huge benefit for residential and for even the smallest of projects. There's never a time you don't need information on a construction project.
Yeah, no, I love that. I don't think my contract has that.
Ooh,
In fact,
well,
I'm pretty confident it doesn't.
there you go.
So definitely try to preserve relationships when possible. So if you're talking about a $1,000 dispute, it might be worth paying that or settling that. Try to avoid the lawsuit, guys.
Yeah.
Use lien waivers. And she even said, use a clause in your contract to protect you from subcontractor liens. So how did I do?
Pretty good. You're a good note taker. I'm impressed. I think
Thank you.
there's so much to learn, and there's always a fun story when it comes. I mean, fun for me, sometimes more for usually the opposing party. But I think there's so much to learn and so many opportunities in this area. I think my big takeaway, this is a little bit borrowed from one of my colleagues' dads, actually, who's been saying it for 60 years. They don't make new dirt. So there's always going to be strong feelings, big opportunities, sometimes big risks too, but big opportunities and ways to really make a big change for yourself and for others when it comes to property. So unless they start making new dirt, it's always going to be an important area that's going to be a right place for people who have a great idea to do something really positive.
Yeah, it's finite.
Yeah.
Okay, so contact information and then final piece of advice.
Absolutely. All right. You can find me. I'm happy to be very easily Googleable, and all of my contact details are on my firm's website. My last name is spelled exactly how it sounds, Rockoff, Rockoff. So if you do that, an attorney, I'm all right there. You can also reach me. My phone is already ringing 3 times during this. So my email is crockoff@maddenhauser.com. So anytime, any place, I'm happy to chat and always happy to make a referral for folks as well.
We'll definitely get all that in the show notes and then the website.
It's just maddenhauser.com, MADDINHAUSER. That's the firm I'm with. So anytime, any place.
All right. You said DC. So that you said Detroit. And what were the other 2?
So I personally am licensed in Michigan, Washington, D.C., and New York. We have a bunch of other states represented through other folks within my firm that I work with. And then if for some reason, if you're in Puerto Rico or Canada or wherever the world takes you, we have our law firm alliance members who represent all 50 states and a bunch of countries as well. So
Cool.
whatever, we can find you a referral no matter what.
All right. So let's pretend I'm a brand new real estate investor. Maybe I have like 1 rental property, something like that. Just kind of get my career going. What's a final piece of advice for me?
Know your contract, live your contract, love your contract. Whatever the category, have it in your hand, know it, and be able to say, I have a solution for that in my contract. Understand it in your heart, and that will save you a lot of time and headache and hassle, and hopefully some litigation down the line too as you grow. Thank you.
Well, Corinne, it's been such a pleasure to get to know you. It's so fun to have the conversation. I love talking to really intelligent people like yourself. So thank you for coming on. I know there's other things you could be doing, and you chose to hang out with me for 40 minutes, 45 minutes, something like that. So thank you so much for that. For the listener, thank you for joining us. I know you got a lot out of this episode, as I did. If you did, assuming you did, give us a 5-star review and share the episode with a friend. We're trying to help more real estate investors just like you. We could do that if you're giving us a great review. So please do that. And with that, I hope you make this day a great one. Thank you. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. If you did, please be sure to follow and leave us a review. Oh yeah, and tell a friend.